Hi there. I'm here on the side because I'm trying to get the camera to focus in on the canvas so you can see what I'm doing. Um, Welcome to my little art studio. We are going to do a little spring landscape today, and there's kind of what we're going for. A little field of wildflowers and a little happy tree. And typically you would be in the studio with me and we would be painting this together. I don't know how to get in the frame, so you'll just have to listen to me. But because we're quarantining, we're going to try a paint along and see what happens. So here we go. I've got my palette here of acrylic paints, and that red looks kind of orange in the camera, but it is a red. We've got a really dark blue-green. We've got a navy or a phthalo blue. We've got some purple, some yellow ochre, some bright yellow and white, and some kind of reddish brown. And that's going to be our palette for our little landscape. And we've got, let's see, probably we'll use these three brushes. So you've got probably a 3/4 inch right there, and then a 1/2 inch maybe, and a little 1/4 inch, something along those lines. Whatever you have handy that you can use. And our cup of water and our shop towel to wipe off our brushes between colors. And we're going to start by doing a little block in of big shapes. So let's see about mixing some purple and blue together. And then we're going to dull that with some green, dark green, and a little bit of red. Let's see if we can get kind of a dull purple color that we can use. And because we want the trees on the horizon line to be a lighter value, so they go back in space, we're going to add in some white to those colors that we mixed up. So I've used some purple, some blue, some red, some green, and now I added some white to lighten it. And that's going to give me the color to get started with my horizon line. And I'm just going to draw this little line across here with this kind of grayish, bluish, purplish. And then I want to create some little silhouettes of some trees back here. So I'm just going to not be fussy, just create some little shapes to suggest trees on the horizon, way in the back. I'll try not to make those shapes too regular or patterned. Okay, something like that. And then I will mix that same color without the white in it for the tree, the big tree. So I want it to be a darker value because it comes forward more, so it's darker. And we're just going to create some little trunks. Let's see here. So let's say our little tree sits right about here. And that needs a little more purple in it. It's reading kind of blue. And let's see, let's come up here. I'm using my brush on its side so I can get a thin line. And then this will be kind of a double trunk. And then we'll have one over here. And then I want a shadow shape under those trunks. So I'll connect those all together with this shape. And let's see if I can paint right-handed. I'm a lefty. I'm going to pull this over here with my right hand. That's fun, using your non-dominant hand. Okay, I'm just going to pull some of that blue down in here. It's a purplish blue. All right, and then for the canopy of the tree, we'll create a shape that is loosely suggestive of a tree. We'll have a few branches come out here. And this is still that blue-purple mix with a little green and red to dull it. It's still looking pretty blue. I'm going to sneak some more purple in there. And what does my tree look like? So maybe I should think about that and quit talking. Okay. It's tree-ish. Some of my trunks look a little thin, so I'm going to thicken this guy up and this guy up. Oops. I pulled paint off the canvas since it was wet. It's okay, I'll let it dry and then I can put that in. Okay, so this is just giving me loose shapes right now that I can build into. Have that kind of branch out here. Let's have this come down a little bit lower, kind of covering those trees in the background a little bit. We'll let a little light peek through there. I don't know, that looks tree-ish. Okay, so we've kind of got this purple-blue underpainting going on, and then in our field, I think I'll switch it up and put some brown, thinking about dirt that I can put some bright green on later. So I'll mix some brown. Here's my plate. I haven't rinsed yet. I'm still just have this brush loaded with all this purple, and I stuck it straight into the brown to create an earthy, almost like an Oklahoma red dirt, kind of in that. We could add a little bit of the yellow ochre to it. Wouldn't hurt. Maybe a little more. Okay, so we're going for lighting is weird here, so we're still figuring this out. Let's see what that looks like on the canvas. It looks like dirt. I think it could have a little more red in it, but so I'll pick up some bright red and mix in there, and a little more yellow. Okay, a little more yellow still. And this is an underpainting, so a lot of this is going to be covered up, but it's just nice to get this down and then build color on top of it. Because this will be a bright green field eventually. All right, so we're filling in between our little tree trunks, and if we paint over them a little bit, it's okay. We'll go back. And then in the foreground, I'm going to get brighter, lighter, so I'll add more yellow gold to that. And I am streaking it back into the purple too, just so those are mixing. And that is just a base to start with. Yeah, it's a start. Okay, that's how we start. So now we're going to play with these trees on the horizon, these little guys. And we want to switch now to the probably 1/2-inch brush or something similar to that. You could do smaller if you needed to. If you're comfortable with a bigger brush, you could do that. This feels like a good size. And I know I want a lot of light in this color, so I'll start with white. And then it's going to have some green, but not a lot of green. I want it to be kind of a grayed out green, so this is way too green. So the opposite of green is red. I'll grab a smidge of red, and you got to be careful with the red. It'll overwhelm very quickly. And we get something, let's see, that's still too bold. So I'm adding yellow because I've got red and green in there. Yellow's the another primary color, so when I start adding all those together, I'm going to get a dull color. So that's a nice dull green that I can kind of start sneaking into. Oh yeah, that works. It's a nice, very dull green so that those trees stay back on the horizon. That had a lot of white, a little bit of green, a little bit of red, and some yellow ochre. And I'm just kind of coming in here and doing a loose suggestion of that color at the tops of those shapes. And then if I want something maybe like an in-between this blue and this green, and this bluey purple. So maybe if I just mix the blue purple with that green that I already had. We do a lot of color mixing when we paint. And sometimes that's half the battle, is figuring out what color you want. And maybe it's more that and value, getting the lights and darks right. So now I've got this kind of weird, I don't even know what you would call that. That's a non-color. It's kind of, I think I'll sneak a little more green in it and a little more purple. Okay, so now it's somewhere in the gray, green, purple family. Oh yeah, that works good. That is kind of in between those two, the first coat. It may actually be a little darker value though than what I started with, so I have to maybe lighten it with a little bit of white. Okay, let's try. Well, we got lighter. We did get lighter. Just kind of come along here and keep playing with gray greens, blue greens that are light back here. That's kind of a pretty light purpley color. Very impressionistic, which is okay. Let's see. Maybe a little more green in there wouldn't hurt. Wouldn't hurt to have a little green. Right now we've got a lot of grays and blues and purples, so we'll sneak a tiny bit of green into some yellow ochre and see if we can get a little more of the green family going on here. Well, we're gonna call that good for now. Okay, we'll come back to it. And now I'm rinsing out my brush, and I think this canopy for the tree is dry enough that we can work on our sky. And we will go to our big brush for the sky. Back to this guy. This guy for the sky. Okay. So there's a lot of white, and we want to play with the color on the sky. So I think we'll have some yellow at the horizon. So real pale yellow. So I'm just going to take with some plain white and just a smidge of yellow, mostly white. Make a nice pale yellow there. And come along here right above the trees, maybe even into the trees a little bit, because if there's a little bit of blending, overlapping of the two, it kind of creates a little bit of an atmospheric haze back there, which is nice. And granted, we do want to make sure that is dry so that it doesn't make our trees a funny color, or make our sky a funny color is actually what I mean. Okay, so here we go. So we put in some pale yellow right above the tree line, and now we'll, and you can't really see that right now, but it is there. So now let's go to some kind of turquoisey color. So for turquoise, we'll start with our base of white, make sure our brush is dried off. Start with a base of white, add a tiny bit of that phthalo blue, a tiny bit of that green. Oh, that's beautiful. That's a nice color. So it's very pale, but that's what we want. It's got a little bit of green to it. And blue, and let's start kind of pulling that into our sky. And I'm going to come right into my tree, because I will be defining my tree more with extra layers. So I've got to make sure I've got my paint mixed well on my brush, and I'm going to try righty here so I can get a good blend. Be a right-hander. Since it's just the sky, I don't have to have perfect little brush strokes. And I did pull it right into the tree, as you can see there. That's okay. kind of down into the yellow a little bit so they blend and overlap, since the yellow's probably still wet. All right, so there's the start of some sky, and it'll get a little darker as you come up. So now I'll add a little more blue to that mix to get my sky to gradually darken up. And long fluid brush strokes are nice in your sky. And we may even want to play with a little more color. Let's pull some pink in there. So we'll put a tiny bit of red into our white mix. Maybe a little, mix that with some of that light blue. And let's pull some little pink clouds through here, just because color's fun. Rinse out my brush, dry it off, and go back in with maybe a little more blue. It's pretty pale. We want it to get darker at the as we come up to the top of the canvas. That helps with the illusion of space and depth. So we'll darken this in. Ooh, that was quite a bit darker. But because my paint's still wet, I can get that to blend in. Went right over the edges of my tree, which actually is kind of a nice effect. Okay, keep pulling that. And I may have to let it dry, because sometimes with acrylic, if you paint wet onto wet, you're just pulling the coat underneath off. You're not really adding any extra paint. So I think we'll call that good for now, and then we can come back to it if we want to. Kind of soften some of that transition area there. Okay. Yeah, there we go. That's not a bad little sky. All right, so we've got some kind of gray-green trees on the horizon, and we've got our field started. Let's look at our tree. So we could start thinking about putting in our lights and darks on that tree. And let's see, that we're going to say the light's coming from this side. So we're going to have light on this side of the tree, more shadow here. So we're still going to use the big brush for this. And our next layer on our tree is going to be kind of an army green, I guess. So let's pull out some of that bold, bright blue green. And we know the opposite is red, so let's put some of that in there. I'm going to have to work on my filming skills if we keep this up. Okay. And then I'll put in a little bit of yellow ochre. It just warms it a little bit, lightens it a little bit too. So that's a base of red with some green and a little yellow ochre. And that gives me a nice dull green that I can start kind of thinking about my little tree here. And I had the base of it. So now I'm just going to put some little brush strokes in to suggest a little more of a definition in our tree. And that's my shadow side, so I'm coming in pretty dark here. Oh, and my little sky holes, I'll have to add more of those back in because that's not enough sky holes, but we can add those in. And then I'll add a little more of the yellow ochre to that same mix as I come across the tree into this side where it's more into the light. And I am going to, yeah, pull it out here where I had the sky coming back into the tree. Okay, so we've got something going on. Something, we're not sure what. A little more yellow in that tree on this side. I like that yellow ochre. And I'll even do a little bit more of the yellow ochre over here just to kind of give a little bit of light to that side. Okay, so what else? Let's go a little greener because this is a spring tree. So we want to see some actual bright spring green on that tree, some new growth. So now we've got this really, oh, I wish you could see the colors. This is an issue. We're using the green plus the true yellow, the bright yellow. And then we're going to still stick a little bit of red in it just to tone it down a little. And it's going to take a lot more yellow than the green since the yellow's the light color. So be sparing with the green and generous with the yellow. And maybe even a tiny bit of white. And more yellow, more yellow, more yellow. So let's see what that does for spring green. Oh, that's bold. Look at that. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. Okay, so there's our spring green. But you want to have a lot of colors in your tree. If you just do green, it won't be as interesting. So I'm going to back off that because it felt pretty loud. And I'm mixing a little purple with it for the other side of the tree that's more in shadow. So it gets some of that green, but it's going to be toned down with some purple. And pulling that same color over here. And then at some point you kind of want to say, well, what shape does my tree have? Is it a good shape? Does it look like a tree? Is it tree-ish? It's kind of tree-ish. I think it could pass as a tree. And I'll reinforce my trunks now because they're dry with a purple-brown mix. I got a little thicker. Those are, they're pretty uniform. I'm gonna, which is kind of what you don't want to do. You don't want to make them look too patterned. I'll stick an extra branch here and maybe one here just to kind of break things up a little bit. So that, and I don't know if you can see that, but I've got a spotlight on the canvas trying to help with lighting. Let's see. Okay. So I've got my bright tree. And now I need a little, you see yellows and oranges in trees if you look at them. They're not all green. So let's mix a little of the brown on our plate with some of the yellow ochre. And let's add in, that's pretty. You know, you want a little, that kind of suggests more of a light. And even maybe some bright yellow and yellow ochre would be nice. Yeah. A little extra light on our tree. And a hint, just a smidge of it on the other side, not much. In fact, that's probably too loud. I'll knock that down. Okay. Okay, and I mean, that may be a bit much. We'll see. We can always adjust it. We can tone it down just by dabbing a little bit. And then the other thing is that you're going to add in more sky holes, but we'll do that once the tree's dry. You don't want to try to do it when all that green and dark stuff is wet. So while that's drying, we will look at our field. And we want this back field to be like a lovely bright spring green. So we're going to go back to our big brush. And to mix the spring green, you would start with the really bold yellow, quite a bit of it, a little bit of green, and you'll get there pretty fast. You could sneak a little yellow ochre in there, wouldn't hurt. It's the goldish colored one. And let's see what that does on that field. Yeah, that's not a bad start. And that brown underneath is nice. It's better than doing this on top of a white canvas. Yeah, that's pretty close to our color. And I'm just using a nice little horizontal brush stroke. Come right up there to those trees on the horizon. Come down here into the shadow and try to get in between the trunks of our trees. You can do a smaller brush there if you need to. And that's one layer. We'll come back in and brighten it up more. That's a layer. Now we're going to darken in that shadow area for our little tree shadow underneath the big tree. So that's purple. And let's put a little yellow ochre in there because yellow is the opposite of purple, and maybe that will give us a nice shadow purple that's not too loud. That's a good color. That's a little yellow ochre mixed into some deep purple there. And I'm using a vertical brush stroke now. You don't have to in here though. You can keep doing horizontal, but at some point I'll start pulling to suggest some grasses. And that is a nice little touch. Again, you've got to be careful about just pulling the paint off when it's wet. You got to let it dry. Do I want that darker? I feel like I may want it a little darker. So I'm going to mix in a little blue too. Blue and purple. And even a little green. Okay, that's a little darker. Okay. There we go. Now for the front field, we'll go with, it's going to be green too. Maybe a little more yellow ochre in that green that we were using. That really bold spring green in the background. We'll throw some extra gold in there. But that alone feels too light, so I've got to get some dark going in there too. So I'll just drag my brush into some purple and the green at the same time and do a variety of colors, light and dark. And I am sticking with that vertical brush stroke now. Since this is close to us, we'd probably see the direction of the grass, unlike back in the back where it would look flat and you'd see horizontal lines. I'm going to pull past the edge of that shadow so I see the tops of the grasses. And my lighting here is kind of throwing me off. I've got a big glare. It's hard to see. I don't know if that was good or bad. Yeah, well, let's see what happens. Okay. So now then, we are going to make it more of a grassy green here. Yellow ochre and green. We want to have a field that we can put some wildflowers in here in a minute. And I'll probably have to let that dry. I just get the feeling that it's going to take more than one layer to get what I want. And I do want a little bit of green in this shadow area. It wouldn't be completely dark. So I'll just kind of sneak a little bit of green in there. Let's see what we have. Okay. Well, what can we do next? These guys need a little different color, and I'm wondering if I want to go greener or bluer. I know, logically that things back on the horizon look bluer, grayer, purpler. So even though I don't necessarily see that in the photograph, I think I want to, that's so blue though. Okay, so the opposite of blue is orange. So I'll stick a little red and yellow in there to tone that down. But I still want some of that blue showing. So this is a very grayed out blue. But and that just, it's not what I want. So I'm going to add a little green to it. So I'm back to my gray green. Decisions. And I can't even really be sure that you can see these subtle color changes because of the lighting. So now I'm just going to be bold and put a little bit of a yellow green on the side that would be hit by the sun. So here's my yellow green, and I'm just thinking, okay, here's a little shrub or tree, and there's its side, and this one would come down here, over here, maybe a little bit of that. So I'm just gonna, even though it's off in the distance, it's spring, I'm gonna give it a little light. Okay. What the heck? Maybe this could be softened in with a little bit of purpley green. Is purpley green a color? Probably. And then rinse my brush real fast and get it kind of clean and damp, and just kind of pull some of those edges up past what we painted in, just to soften, give it kind of a little hazy look back there. Ooh, I dipped the handle of my brush in paint. That's a bit messy. And you can